This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Geragos and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on the show. We're going to get on. Welcome to the best hour or so in the universe. It's Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla. Mark Geragos in studio.
In studio. Even though they may not be dropped day to day, this is twice in 2 days, is it not?
You're a busy man, and we appreciate it. So first, the elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room. My Valentine's Day card, or the card with my picture on it.
Yes, I opened up an envelope. It was from you and your family, a picture of you and your wife and your son and your daughter and her new husband. And there it was. It was sending love for the Valentine's Day. And my first thought is, because I come from a very different family than you, that this is a goof. And then the next one was, no, I think Paulette meant this. And then I thought, well, then Mark had nothing to do with this.
Boy, you know me well. I opened it before I came here, and I said, what the hell is this? And how was I left out of the loop?
Is this a tradition?
I have no idea. I mean, apparently somebody had some money to burn, and, I mean.
Well, the picture's from the wedding, right?
Yes, because that was the suit I was wearing, and she's wearing the wedding dress, and we certainly didn't recostume ourselves before Valentine's Day. But I don't understand why we're sending out Valentine's Day cards. I mean, we don't even send out Christmas cards. So what? I don't get it. I have no idea.
Well, I have thoughts. Now, it's either because your wife is super thoughtful, or
she's a very thoughtful woman. She thinks quite a bit.
Or she's sending a message basically explaining that your family's better than ours and all who receive the card, because your first impulse is, shit, I would never do this. And then secondly, like, man, it's kind of that feeling. You ever walk before you go into someone's house, you ever go into their garage,
right,
and the garage is filled with stainless steel cabinetry with Euro hinges and self-closing doors, and you go, God, this person's got their shit together.
Well, I always look at the floor of the garage. Floor. The floor is key.
Oh, it's got a polish on it. It's got 3 coats of epoxy. It
looks like you could sit on it and eat off the floor.
It's got the epoxy with the flake in it. It's got 3 coats of Varathane, and you're going, shit, my inside of my house doesn't look as good as the garage, and then you feel a little lesser than.
Yeah, it's a certain kind of, I guess the kind of a dick measuring contest in a way. I hate to be crude about it, and I'll get excoriated for that, but there is something about that, especially in the garage when you look at the floor. I always feel inadequate. And there's a guy halfway between us and La Cañada who's got one of the most pristine garages you'll ever want to see. And he had a beautiful Porsche. I haven't seen it recently. But when I walk by that and the garage door is open, I'm envious and I'm a little kind of, I have a chip on my shoulder.
Is it the guy with the double stacker?
Yeah, exactly.
Looking at him yesterday.
Did you really?
Yeah.
It's an intimidating thing.
Yeah, because he has a pitched roof in his garage with a faux window up top that gives you the illusion of, oh, that's attic space, but It's really just ceiling. There's no ceiling in there. It's just height.
Exactly.
So he can double stack his Porsches.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy has 4 Porsches.
Oh, yeah.
I was walking past it with Phil.
And they're good specimens.
He was in his 930 Turbo the other day, and I stopped and took a good look.
So every time that garage door is open, I'm there, with Porsche envy, especially post Jake totaling mine. It's by the way, apparently one of the insurance adjusters must listen to Reasonable Doubt, because on a Saturday morning after we talked about that, I got a series of questions about Jake from the adjuster, which I thought was fascinating, that somebody actually downloaded, listened to it, and then had questions.
Well, circling back, or at least leading off with Alec Baldwin and Rust, something that didn't exist until 10 minutes ago is people going on to podcasts, people going on to Instagram, people saying, I'm going to give an impromptu statement about X, Y, and Z. it's out there, it's captured, it's accessible, and it may come back to bite you in the ass. And we talked about Baldwin, talking to reporters, giving a little impromptu roadside Q&A, making statements, sitting down with so-and-so from the evening news and telling his side. And it's all well and good, but it all falls into the hamper of potential evidence that somebody can hear and then have some follow-up questions.
So if you take a look, if you're watching this on YouTube, right, Gary?
Yeah, that's right. YouTube.com/Adam Carolla.
Right. It's probably worth your while because this is something that has really there's a couple of Armo brothers. I don't know if they did this one, but no, it doesn't look like it. This is DK Global. It's got a little thing on there giving them a free plug. But Motion Lit, I think, are the Armo twins. But this has really overtaken the practice of law. And why don't you show this,
the computer-generated video.
Yeah.
We'll roll it for you guys.
As to what happened, but through the eyes of the accusers or the computer.
If Mr. Baldwin ever aimed the gun at the camera.
Pulls the hammer back, and the question is he says he never pulled the trigger. Now, I would imagine that some gunsmith is going to be able to examine that gun and figure out whether the firing mechanism was worn and it could have gone off by itself, or if, in fact, you needed to squeeze that trigger.
When you shake a dummy round, you hear a BB rattle. When you shake a live bullet, you do not hear anything.
Yeah, look at that. They're
pulling the bullets out. Yep. They're doing the whole sort of cutaway.
Here you go. What Alex Baldwin says happened.
I take the gun and I start to cock the gun. I'm not going to pull the trigger. I said, do you see that? She goes, well, just cheat it down and tilt it down a little bit like that. And I cock the gun. I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off. I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
Right. So he didn't have to squeeze the trigger. Could have pulled the hammer back. Not locked it in, but just pulled it back and let it go.
There's definitely two deliberate acts that were required there. He had to cock the gun and he had to press the trigger.
Gun expert.
If he had his finger on the
By
trigger,
the way, press pause for 1 second, Gary. Always a good thing to have on the cryon down below. Alex Baldwin, I feel no guilt.
All right.
Right. Just a little touch there that I'm sure when they put it together was deliberate.
Right. So when you pull it back, you cock it, it locks, then you have to pull the trigger. But if you don't pull it back far enough to lock it, then you could let it go and the hammer would still spring forward.
I think that's exactly what he's going to say right here.
This to us.
Yeah.
here and he's pressing it, he may not be aware that he's pressed the trigger. Then he pulls the hammer back.
Right.
And then he releases it, and then the gun fires.
Oh, so he's saying the trigger was pulled back when
exactly.
And
that he may not have realized it, which is, I've heard other people opine on that exact same thing.
But it had to be inside of the trigger guard, and
Correct.
he'd have his finger on the trigger. And then it goes off, and then it strikes.
And then look at this. This is just devastating.
It shows the bullet enter the right side and go through the lungs or maybe the heart, and then come out the left side through the ribs. And it's all very graphic. So here's a more global question. This is accurate to some degree, but it's also their version of how this thing played out.
Correct.
Now,
their version using, as we had talked about months ago, his words were going to come back to haunt him. He's going to be hoisted on that. That's why I do not I'll get into it. I don't know who's repping him, but why they didn't tackle him. And I've been there, so I'm not casting aspersions. I've been where the client just won't listen. But here you go. This was not exactly, Karnak the Magnificent. You knew this is where it was headed.
You didn't need a crystal ball to know that.
Or a crystal brain.
Oh, right. Thank you. But the question still remains, or the question I haven't posed yet is this is the kind of thing that could taint a jury pool.
Correct.
And we're living in a new age where, we're going to ask people if they saw this. Many are going to say, yes, I did see it. And then we're going to say, is that going to affect your decision making? And they're going to say, absolutely not. But how could it not? So where are we in this sort of, I presume everyone's going to come out with their own video of what happened.
Well, this is it'll start a practical cottage industry of it. I will tell you something. We talked yesterday on Beyond about the fact that when the judge in New York in the Palin trial announced that he was going to dismiss the case while the jury was still deliberating, right? Mm-hmm. Guess what was reported today?
That a bunch of jurors got push notifications on their phone from like Apple News saying...
While deliberating. So,
right.
I mean, we are in, as you were, I think, I'm building on what you were about to say, we're in a different era. We're in a different world. And the law and the participants have not caught up.
Right. So these kinds of videos is the video admissible? Is the actual, or could one argue that the release of the videos already tainted the potential jury pool? And I know we're chasing it because we always are. It's like the government wants to know how to regulate Bitcoin, because they're 80 and they've never heard of it, and they're way out ahead. The Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is way out ahead of them. Now they're chasing it, trying to figure out a way how to regulate it. What are we going to do with it?
Banks were angry about it, and while at the same time buying blockchain technology. This is I hate to be a cynic about it, but if this were produced by the prosecution in a criminal case, almost every judge is going to allow it in as long as it tracks what the evidence is. Now, would they allow it in a case in chief? Would they allow it in argument? What phase? That may be up for discussion. However, in a criminal case, that's clearly going to come in at one point, either as evidence when you have an expert testifying, and he will say, this is what I've got, this is what I based it on. I've been there. I've had that a zillion times. Or the judge will say, okay, I'm not going to let you show it in your case in chief as evidence, but I am going to allow you to play it in the context of either an opening statement or closing argument.
So you're asking what Baldwin's attorneys were thinking, and I agree with you, at least your assertion that he's not really that controllable. If he's going out on a ride with his wife and there's a group by the side of the road and they ask questions, he gives answers. He weighs in. That's what he does. So, but the attorney for the deceased, now they released this video.
Brian is a very effective lawyer. He's a local lawyer here in Los Angeles. I think a Fresno State grad, like my mother. Brian has a firm and has tried some very substantial cases and knows how to try a case. He's a real trial lawyer. I think that he has a completely defensible position because what has happened is
for releasing this.
Alec Baldwin has gone out there and done interviews. Mm-hmm. He's done interviews that specifically say what happened, right? And they use the words. So under the rules, and I'll tease this and I'll get to it after the spot, but under the rules, you have a right to free speech and a right to respond. And so I'm going to get to that in a sec. But first, Audible 2022 is all about making positive change, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that what we're doing? Audible, your destination for wellness, inspiration, to create new goals, unwind, or simply be entertained. Enjoy all your audio entertainment in one app. You'll always find the best of what you love or something new to discover. My personal recommendation, Mistrial, by Awesome Dawson. I'm also reading right now a book about, and I'm going to probably switch over to Audible on it, kind of a billionaire's poker on Caesar. And so it's easier for me to listen at night than it is to read later in the day. As an Audible member, you can choose one title a month to keep from the entire catalog, which is incredible, including the latest bestsellers and new releases. New members can try Audible free for 30 days. Visit audible.co/RD or text RD to 500-500. That's audible.co/RD or text RD to 500-500. So there are different rules about the use of pretrial publicity for civil versus criminal, things of that nature. And it also differs by jurisdiction. And so one of the things that you always look at, criminal, you can always respond, especially if the prosecution's out there, basically slamming your client at the announcement. We've solved the crime. Here it is. You got prosecutors and the FBI out there with a table full of evidence. Civil becomes a little bit more pernicious in the sense that you have to understand who's doing what. And in this case, when you have somebody like that is a matter of public interest and you have him going out there and making statements, Alec Baldwin or his lawyers are going to have a very tough time later on telling Panish and his team, well, you were out there tainting the jury pool. Well, then they just point to the interview and say, right. You're the one, you lay down the gauntlet. That's another, you're giving them an argument that lets you kind of grab the narrative away and do what they want, because that's very effective. It's a very effective recreation down to the kind of the look of Alec Baldwin himself.
How does the order work, civil versus criminal?
Usually, in a case like this, the criminal is still under investigation. And the last time I looked, neither the sheriff nor the DA has said they've closed the investigation. It's still active. It's still ongoing. It would not surprise me in the least. A lot of times you will see where the civil people can actually work in tandem with the prosecutors. So they could say, here's our tape based on an expert that we made up. You want to use it? Be our guest. Or this is what we've developed by our parallel investigation. Unless and until the criminal case is filed, the civil can move along. If a criminal case is filed and it charges Alec Baldwin, he would then presumably move to stay the civil, meaning press pause, until after the criminal case.
Are there any instances where the civil takes place before the criminal?
Very rarely, but I've seen instances where the civil takes place before and then the civil is used to bootstrap a criminal case. That sometimes I've had cases where, for instance, prosecutors will let the civil go forward because they want to see how the evidence develops before they make a decision.
Even though it's a lesser burden.
Correct. Even though it's a lesser burden. But there's certain things that you can develop in that situation.
So where do you think legally or criminally, in terms of exposure, Baldwin is on this one?
I've said it before. I'll say it again. I would be very afraid of an involuntary manslaughter charge. I just think that there's some of the things that were alleged in the complaint that was filed yesterday about cutting corners, which I've always said they were going to go there because and you're going to also be somewhat concerned if you're there about the tower of insurance that stands between you and the and all of the people who are filing these cases. And the insurance companies are going to do a full court press to develop anything that shifts the blame over to Baldwin, the producers, because they want to get themselves out from the kind of the obligation to pay. I mean, so you've got people who are there trying to take you down with various motivations.
Unanswerable question, but that's all you answer. So here goes. How much in this day and age, in this zeitgeist, do optics factor in? Rich, blue-eyed, white guy, young, beautiful mother. There's a kind of a class thing. The star of the movie can shoot, essentially a worker, drop it in nothing, scot-free. You know what I mean? Is the optics, the message that's being sent. And I would say now the opposite of we don't like that anymore. There was too much of that in the past. But he's portrayed as a big star, thinks he's untouchable. She's a young mom working her way up, and he shoots her dead.
Well,
versus, what I'm saying is what if a fat guy who was a grip walked through and he got shot?
Would it be? Well, I think clearly.
Or what if the grip shot the star? You know what I mean?
Well, also, can I piggyback on that a little bit? Which is, isn't it easier to versus a grip? Isn't it easier with her to draw a career path line that ends with her being a director of movies, making millions each time? How does that factor in?
Yeah, and I'm talking criminal, but keep going.
I've always thought that trials and prosecutions and basically the legal system is always a tale of stories or a narrative, and that's what it is. And who captures that, who tells the best story. It's one of the reasons I like hanging out with trial lawyers. They tell the best stories, and that's the same thing to jurors. Jurors want to hear a story. They want a story. They either want a story that then leaves them at the end with the ability to create a happy ending, or they want a story that allows them to kind of wreak havoc on the person who's they consider to be the villain. I mean, I think based on our cultural anthropology, we have and mythology, we relate to life through myths, through stories. It's been the case for as long as we've had rational discourse or even an imagination or self-reflection. So it's always, I think, the best story, which, to answer your question, is the optics. The optics make a difference. Always have, and I don't think it's any different right now than it was when, 100 years ago.
So maybe we can break down the components here. You never point a gun at somebody, but if they're trying to capture a shot, I've done it many times on a set where you're not pointing a gun, but you're holding something and you're leaning it forward, and they're like, there's a shadow, we can't see it, tilt it this way. So it's perfectly plausible that he's holding the gun and they're trying to get a shot of the hammer, the thumb, or whatever it is, and they're tilting it down until you can see it.
It's interesting you say that, because when you're watching his interview, that more expanded version, we didn't play it all, I thought the most convincing or compelling part of what he said was exactly that. She was
right.
I thought that was that rang or resonated.
Well, it lives in a place that makes sense. She's the DP or cinematographer. They're trying to, why do you need to point a gun at someone during rehearsal? Well, the answer is it needs to be lit, and we need to know the camera is at the right height. They can move the camera up a little and shoot a little down, or you can tilt your hand down a little. They're constantly kind of getting you to do things that are a little unnatural so they can capture it, the right way. So that perfectly makes sense in terms of holding the gun. And it also makes sense if they wanted to get a shot of him pulling the hammer back or what have you. So that part's kind of taken care of. He should have known it was a dummy round. Everyone needs to check. That is that feels like a high bar. I mean, considering it may be a practice, there's a lot of when you order when you get a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese, it says serves 8. You eat the whole fucking box. That's not really on you. You know what I mean? They go, here's what you should have been doing, but who amongst us and how many times has a celebrity been on a set and had the gun wrangler just hand it to them? Do you think they pulled the bullet out and shook it by their ear and then checked it for the primer and then weighed it and put it back in the gun? I mean, that's pretty plausible to say, look, that's not reasonable, even though it's discussed as reasonable. It just isn't. But as a producer, you hired the gun wrangler, and now we may be getting back to a manslaughter position. And if you cut corners in any way, shape, or form, that's part of a narrative that you will see prosecutors embrace, because that's going to be something they think is really significant and a driver of a story that is more compelling than otherwise. I mean, if you spared no expense, that doesn't get somebody fired up. Well, so my question for you is, while everyone is kind of fixated on did he squeeze the trigger, did he pull the hammer back, or how could the gun fire if he didn't squeeze the trigger, I think ultimately a lot of that can be explained away to a reasonable doubt, but not the bunch of emails saying, you know, here's an experienced gun wrangler, and you going, that guy's too much, we need somebody cheaper, you know. Well, then someone writes back, this person's less experienced, but we can get him for $400 a day. You know, those are the kinds of things that are going to come out.
Those are hot docs, smoking guns, so to speak,
right?
Pun intended.
That seems to be
tough stuff. I want to segue to something because I've been thinking about this all day and yesterday. Gary, I don't even know if I alerted you to this, but do you have should I tease it first or?
No, yeah, I can do a spot.
Okay.
Well, no, don't tease it because whenever you say, I'm not sure if I told Gary about this, you didn't tell Gary about it. And then I got to watch poor Gary scramble for it. So if you want him to look for something.
Give me a hint.
The public school San Francisco recall.
Oh, yeah, I have that, but you didn't send it to me. Okay. But I got it.
So we're both right. All right, let me tell you about the ladders. We're experiencing the biggest change in society and the workplace since World War II. Recruiters, don't underestimate the growth in job market this year. Make this your best year, even with ladders. That's right. It'll be the best one ever, I should say, with ladders, where smart recruiters and hiring managers find superior, expertly screened candidates to fill jobs 100K to 500K positions and everything in between. On average, ladders job seekers have 15 years experience and most have a bachelor's or master's degree. Ladders saves you time with the tap to call, one-click contact, unlimited resume, downloads, and advanced features that separate active, ready-to-hire candidates from those just shopping. It's ladders, right, Gary?
That's absolutely right. Save time and effort. Step up your search to the ladders and target professionals that meet your specs the first time. Visit theladders.com/podcast. That's THELADDERS.com/podcast.
All right, so you sent Gary the thing about the San Francisco school boarders.
We've been talking about California and what's happening in California. Yesterday, I don't know when this drops, but when we're taping this.
Drops today.
It drops today, okay. These three were successfully recalled from the school board in San Francisco.
Correct.
By 70%?
They all reached more than 72% of the vote.
Okay, this is, and at the same time, juxtapose this with, I believe, a poll that was released yesterday about Gavin Newsom in California, who was overwhelmingly beat back the recall last November, right? And I will tell you, you juxtapose both of these stories, and this is the canary in the coal mine for the left and for the Democrats, of which I am still one. If they don't understand what's happening out there, this has been literally the recall of Gavin was in November. So you've got December, January, February. We're 90 days away from that. People are fed up. People, even in California, in bluest California, are just done with this nonsense that you and I have been talking about for 2 years. I don't know. I don't know when the inflection point was, but the idea that 3 school board members in San Francisco, of all places, could get recalled at 70%, and take a look at this, blow up Newsom's on the issues as to what's going on here. Look at homelessness. I mean, this guy is
poor is 66%, fair is 18%, and excellent. I don't know who they must have went by Gavin's mom's place. I mean, who's putting that? Who is putting? I would want the people arrested.
Anybody who said excellent, I'd like to drop you in Venice or downtown and spend the night. Okay, anywhere Venice Beach, I got a spot for you. But and then I saw yesterday Bill Kristol, who's a former Republican, maybe a current Republican who's disaffected, and he echoed the same thing I was thinking, that guys, if you don't wake up, you are going to get blasted like you've never been blasted for some of this. Part of what they were talking about is these school board members. Well, the kids are not in school. They're spending a third of their time talking about, or maybe half of their time, talking about renaming a third of their schools. Okay?
Right.
I mean,
they want to get rid of Lincoln and Jefferson.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I get that. However, at a certain point,
they want to get rid of Dianne Feinstein.
Well, Dianne
school.
Feinstein, by the way, the lowest approval. Take a look at her approval rating. She hasn't given a press conference. She hasn't made. Other than hugging Lindsey Graham. She's down to something like 31%. 31%. She makes George Gascon look popular.
I've seen Joanne Woodward give more press conferences in the last 5 years than Dianne Feinstein. Google that, bitches.
What? I don't. This is what I don't understand. You and I can be on opposite sides of the political aisle. I don't even know that we are anymore. I think there's very little space between us. However, the fact remains that if you're an objective observer of what is going on, if you force yourself to try to be objective, how can you tell me that this isn't a 5-alarm fire politically for Democrats in California?
Well, it's an interesting mindset, and I've bounced it off Dr. Drew, and I'd be curious what you think from just a kind of a sociological thought. And Dr. Drew doesn't like when I refer to it as chick think, but I shall. First off, just to set the table, I dropped Natalia off this morning. Sun is shining, not a cloud in the sky. And with echoes of the mask mandate being dropped in California or L.A. County, but not in schools, and I'm dropping her off in front of the school at 8:30 in the morning, and the principal's out there wearing the mask outside. All the kids are climbing out of the car, already have pre-donned the mask just to get out of the car, lest they get busted on the sidewalk for not wearing the mask. I've talked to my son. They got $1 million renovation on a brand new cafeteria that no one's allowed in, except for they are allowed in because they set the food up in the cafeteria, but then they have to go outside and eat it. I get the call from the school nurse 2 nights ago at 8:45. Sonny's been exposed. He's allowed to listen to this science. This is insane. And then I'll circle back and I'll try to maintain my composure. She's explaining that there's some sort of form of moderate. She called it. I wrote it down somewhere, and I'll find it. But what she was calling it is a sort of modified quarantine. And I said, so my son has been exposed. By the way, I'm the worst person ever to talk to about this. She's like, has your son been vaccinated? I don't know. Maybe. Does he have a card? Let me ask the nanny.
Yeah, Olga would know. I wouldn't know.
I'll check the drawer with the batteries. Everything ends up there. Has he been exposed? Has he had COVID?
I'm not sure.
He's not a complainer. We don't talk a lot. I'm in Malibu 3 days a week. Well, has he had it? It's hard to tell. You don't know these days. All right, so you don't know if he's had it. No, I don't. Maybe. Well, then what about the card? I don't know. I'd have to make a couple of phone calls. Maybe. He might have that. And then she goes, he's been exposed. I go, yeah, okay, great. She goes, we need a modified quarantine. I go, how's the modified quarantine work? Well, he'd do all the school activities, participate in everything, and then he has to quarantine. And I said, okay, so no school for how many days? No, the school. And then he can participate in the activities, and then but with the quarantine, it's a modified quarantine. I said, all right, hold on. It's a I'm pretty good at talking. Let me just see if I get this straight. He's quarantining because he's been exposed, so he's not allowed to come into school, right? No. Comes to school, participates in all the extracurricular activities, and then goes home and quarantines. I said, So he stays in his room after he's done.
After he's done interacting socially
for 9 hours.
Right.
And then I lock him in his room?
Yeah.
That's how this works? Yeah, it's a modified.
My mom used to call this grounding me.
Quarantine. I know. You didn't have a computer full of porn. Let's be honest.
It was before the internet.
But there is no more grounding anymore. It's just me time. But the point is like, all right. So he shows up at school and then he quarantines after he's done with school back in his room. That's what you're suggesting? Yeah, that's how it works. And I go, okay, then here's what I don't get. But if he's not vaccinated, he can't come back. And I said, but if you're vaccinated, you can still get it. You can still spread it. So then why can't he come back if he's not vaccinated? Well, I'd have to check on that. I got to look up because the data everything's fluid. You know what I mean?
It's just because there's no semblance of any rationality behind any of this.
When he's doing his partial quarantine, he can show up.
Right.
Nobody can go in the cafeteria. It was 39 degrees and hailing. 2 days ago, they have to eat outside.
Right.
They have to eat their shit in the freezing, and they'll get pelted under a tree, potential lightning strike. They have to go out there. If they eat outside, the state-of-the-art cafeteria is uninhabitable except for when they're walking in and getting the fish tacos and the fish sticks and stuff, corn dogs. Then they can cohabitate. But then they have to go outside and eat. And then with the modified quarantine, he's going to have to sit 6 foot away from his friends. And, of course, because the mask is going to come down to eat the square-shaped pizza.
Right.
So I'm just listening going, oh, okay. Yeah,
that's
all right.
where we are.
Yeah. I approach it the same way when you talk to a homeless person and they're explaining that they're the CEO of Nabisco and tell,
exactly.
Okay, there you go. You want $1?
Here's
I got a
$5.
phone
Go
call.
get a sandwich.
Right. So there is no signs, but as I drop off Natalia, I see the adults and everyone else just standing out in the sunshine, wearing a paper mask, which we figured out has no effect on this whatsoever. Right. Okay. So that's where we're at. That's us as a society.
Well, and I just don't understand how we find this to be I just don't understand it. I'm perfectly perplexed as to what is happening and how this is, what the end game is here. But let's shift to something else.
Yeah. Well, I guess, let's put a button on it to where we started with this. I guess it's encouraging that people are fighting back in San Francisco, at least a little bit. If you're looking for a little bit of light.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So.
Well, I like I said, the local legal paper was asking me for comment today on a story they're writing about a lawsuit that was dismissed for violating COVID restrictions or the mandate, and it involved the firefighters, I think, who were challenging the mandate. And I said it's apparent to me that I've said it a million times, we're living under a COVID constitution, which is a separate amendment to the Bill of Rights that I didn't know existed, and a state of perpetual emergency because, as I've stated before, Barbara Ferrer, who is the county health officer, has no authority absent a state of emergency by the governor who just lifted the mask mandate. And apparently nobody wants to hold anybody accountable for any of the things they're doing. That's fine. That's great. But guess what's going to happen? I'm going to predict this. The public this is just the beginning. The public has had it. The public is not going to tolerate this anymore. And there's going to be a political kind of retribution. And it's, don't say that, you couldn't see it coming, because it's obvious to me.
Agreed. All right, we have one more story.
One more story.
Yeah.
Should we rope in Alexandra since she's here?
We can do that. Or we can do the one that you sent me last night, the shakeups over at CNN.
Oh, I like this one. Sorry, Alex. She walked in with a bottle of 1942. Did you notice that?
I saw that.
Yeah, because she there's a story that we'll tell on Beyond. So this is really something. I think 8 weeks ago, when you were kind enough to remind Megan to have me on her podcast, she and I started talking because she was giving me a hard time about CNN. I had predicted back then. Megyn Kelly. I had predicted back then that it was there were big shakeups coming, as we've discussed. Well, yesterday another shoe dropped.
Yeah, Jeff Zucker's girlfriend, who was involved in the scandal but was going to keep her job, that lasted about 8 days.
Yeah.
And by the way, speaking of which, I watched last night. Do you know what I actually saw on CNN? I turned it on. I actually saw reporting about Ukraine and Russia.
Right.
It's like, wow.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I've actually turned on and heard news.
Yeah. It is. Look, CNN is a business, and they have to tack back toward the middle or get off whatever course they're on that we've kind of talked about before. The problem is a lot of the politicians, getting back to what we were just talking about, need to start looking at it as a business. You know what I mean? Which is you can't just run down crazy road forever and expect things to work out for you. Right. So CNN, the private sector's got a mandate, a kind of metronome. You know what I mean? We're on the clock. Money's going out the window. There's a hole in the side of the ship. We need to patch it now. For some reason, politicians, whether it's the homeless or shutting down schools or mandates or whatever, they kind of go, yeah, water's rushing in. I'm going to take a nap. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have that sense of urgency. It gets to them, but they're on kind of a 4-year plan. The CNN's on a 4-week plan. Like, shit has to change. You're down 80% in the ratings.
And you called it. I'll give you this. I mean, you've already seen a change. I can see it already just flipping through the channels, and it's almost a pivot that's like whiplash to some degree. And you have this kind of deja vu. Wow, I remember when I used to be able to turn it on and hear international news and analysis as to what's going on.
Even some of the announcers, you're starting to ask Biden some tougher questions and kind of follow up. It's not just so-and-so from Fox News, sparring with Jen Psaki. Like, you have people sort of getting back, sort of out of the Trump derangement syndrome and back to just being reporters and journalists.
Right.
So
it's just and for those of you who say, okay, we're not equal opportunity, we'll also address them beyond the Mazer accounting with Trump and whatever else. But we try to hit all the issues. But there aren't, and I think you point this out a lot, Adam, there aren't a lot of people who kind of analyze it the way from inside outside, and that's what we're trying to do.
All right, let me hit my last spot. Geico, do you own, do you rent your home? Well, sure you do, one or the other, and you work hard too. Well, it's easy bundling your policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your automotive policy. You go to geico.com, you get a quote, you see just how much you could save and how easy it is to save when you visit Geico. That is geico.com today. Geico. All right. This weekend, Seattle, Tacoma. Man, Tacoma's sold out? No. What's sold out? Sorry.
Tacoma, I believe, is sold out.
Tacoma's sold out. But it says Seattle and Tacoma. I'm not going to be in Seattle.
You're kind of the king of the Northwest, huh?
For some reason, yeah,
it's a typo. Spokane.
Spokane. I don't know if that's a typo. I put it under the brain fart.
Sure.
If it said Pocan,
that's
a typo.
Or Pokey. It
says Seattle. Yeah. Anyway, late show, Spokane, maybe a couple tickets left. Everything else is sold out. And you go to AdamCarolla.com for all the live shows. What do you got, Mark?
Well, the Gigi's down at V Palm Springs is really hitting it out of the park. Stop by. Also, Elixir out at, if you want to get a little sun, if you're in New York City, stop by the Moxie Hotel, and we've got Prova there, and we've got a Prova in Grand Central Terminal. And if you're in downtown LA, 10E, Mediterranean Tapas.
So, until next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Geragos saying, mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.